Tonight,
we are sorry.
The federal government offers an apology to the Dakota and Lakota Nations. Why rising farmland prices could be good and bad for farmers.
Our ancestors were here.
And one Indigenous man's journey to find his Scottish roots.
This is CBC Saskatchewan News.
It is Monday, July 15th, and the CBC Saskatchewan News starts right now. I'm Ethan Williams in for Sam McCagg. Thanks for joining us tonight. The federal government issued a long-awaited apology today. Crown Indigenous Relations Minister Gary Ananda-Sangri apologized to the Dakota and Lakota Nations for denying them treaty benefits given to other First Nations. Jason Warwick has more.
Generations of Dakota and Lakota people have waited for and fought for an apology from the Canadian government, and they got that today here at the Whitecap Dakota First Nation south of Saskatoon.
On behalf of the Government of Canada and all Canadians, we seek to begin to mend this injustice with three simple words. We are sorry.
At an event with over 500 elders, First Nations leaders, and others from across the Great Plains region, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, the northern U.S., Ananda-Sangri, he said that it's just the beginning, it's not the end, that this apology is about a lot more than just words. He talked about the historic wrongs that have faced all First Nations people, but this apology was specifically to the Dakota and Lakota peoples of the regions now known as Saskatchewan and Manitoba for designating them as refugees when the treaties were negotiated, simply because of the migration patterns and denying them all of the treaty benefits and other multi-million-dollar settlements that were reached with First Nations over the decades, as recently as 2007. That will all now change, and people like longtime Whitecap First Nation Chief Darcy Bear say that this has to change, and they're going to hold the minister accountable.
We do accept your apology, but there's also got to be actions with that apology. There has to be actions with that apology. We are not here today to accept hollow and empty apology. We want something that there is actually going to be action behind it. And that's very important to all of us in this room, something our ancestors have worked hard for and want that recognition they deserve. And I know this term refugee, I know we certainly have never utilized it. We never acknowledge it. I think that's what made us stronger, saying, no, we are not refugees. This is our rightful place. These are our territories, whether you like it or not. We are here. These are our lands, and always have been our lands since time immemorial.
Other chiefs and elders say this is a great first step, but they agree that much more needs to be done. Now, it's unclear exactly what the next steps will be, but they're clear that they don't want to negotiate or discuss any future plans as a large group. They want to be considered individual nations that will be negotiating and talking with the federal government. So those plans will take shape in the coming weeks and months. Jason Warwick, CBC News, Whitecap, Dakota First Nation.
The annual summer gathering of premiers kicked off today in Halifax. They began their meetings by sitting down with Indigenous leaders. The scheduled topic was health care, but as Olivia Stefanovich reports, Indigenous leaders had something else on their minds.
Nova Scotia Premier Tim Houston is playing host this week at a big meeting. He's meeting with his provincial and territorial counterparts, but today a meeting with Indigenous leaders who had their own priorities, with little time to share them. Each Indigenous leader only allocated 10 minutes to speak.
Well, it doesn't send a great message, really. Let's be honest. If we're going to have a 10-minute conversation, what can we really talk about in 10 minutes? Not much.
The conversation took place behind closed doors and ended up lasting longer than expected. 3 hours instead of the 2.5 originally scheduled.
Honestly, this is the third Council of the Federation meeting that I've attended, and I think that there was more of an understanding of the direction that we want to take these meetings in the future than there has been in the past 2 years.
National Indigenous leaders say they went into the meeting feeling disrespected. And even though no firm commitments were made, they left with a sense of optimism.
I do feel as though there is openness. Change takes time. It takes relationship building.
We were able to say very frank things and have an open conversation about where we need to go. And now a lot of it is on Doug Ford as the Premier who's hosting Council of Federation next year to work on improving the space.
The Premiers say they're willing to listen and make changes to hear more from Indigenous leaders.
Premiers are going to have a serious conversation with Indigenous leadership about how these meetings take place to make sure that we're evolving and representing as best as possible the leadership across Canada to be able to reach resolution on some of these really challenging issues.
Some of those issues include housing, affordability, and federal-provincial relations, topics expected to dominate the conversations between premiers over the next 2 days. Olivia Stefanovich, CBC News, Halifax.
The truck driver who caused the deadly Humboldt Broncos bus crash has applied to have his permanent resident status returned. Jaskirat Singh Sidhu had that status revoked in May after he was ordered to be deported. Sidhu moved to Canada from India in 2014. His lawyer says Sidhu has applied to regain permanent resident status on humanitarian grounds. He and his wife have a 1-year-old with severe heart and lung complications, which his lawyer says would make living in India difficult. It will likely take several months before Sidhu's lawyer hears anything about the application, and it could take up to 2 years to process. Sidhu pleaded guilty to dangerous driving offenses as a result of the 2018 bus crash. He was sentenced to 8 years in prison, but was granted full parole last year. A Saskatchewan girl who became a TikTok sensation by sharing her health story online has died. Bella Thompson, who went by Bella Brave on social media, was from Swift Current. She was born with a number of rare health conditions, and millions of people followed her story online as she kept her spirits up during repeated hospitalizations. Thompson was being treated at Sick Kids Hospital in Toronto after her health began to deteriorate. Bella's mother says she died yesterday afternoon after being placed in a medically induced coma. Bella Thompson was 10 years old. Innovation Saskatchewan has announced over $500,000 in funding for nuclear-related research at the University of Regina. The news comes as the province moves closer to potentially adopting small modular reactor technology. SMRs can produce electricity in the range of 50 to 300 megawatts, but can be small enough to fit in a school gymnasium and are transportable. The $580,000 in funding will help prepare students interested in nuclear energy, according to one researcher.
Thinking about what SRC is going to have to do in terms of hiring Sask Power, Westinghouse, Cameco, there's a lot of opportunities there, and so it's really great to be at the forefront of that, trying to train up the next generation of students to work in this industry.
Sask Power announced earlier this year that it has identified Estevan as the potential location for the province's first small modular reactor. A final decision on whether the province will build an SMR facility won't come until 2029, though, and if it's approved, the facility is not expected to come online until the mid-2030s. A new report shows the cost of farmland in Saskatchewan is on the rise. But despite increased property values, some farmers say it's a double-edged sword. Will McClernand has more.
The Cresses have been farming this land just outside Odessa for generations. Darren Cress and his brother started their operation about 12 years ago. They say expanding their 5,000-acre grain and cattle farm has been a struggle. That's because it's so expensive to buy more land.
Right from the start, it was always tough, and the price of farmland has gone up every year, since then. And what you once thought was a high price, it only got higher.
And they are not alone. A recent report from RE/MAX shows the price per acre of Saskatchewan farmland rose by more than 15% last year. An acre of the most desired farmland in the province now goes for an average of $6,500. Even though it's harder to afford, some say there are benefits.
I think it creates healthy competition in the marketplace is what it does, because Saskatchewan has been very undervalued as far as farmland prices for a very long time. And I think we're in a catch-up mode right now, just to get back on base with the rest of the country.
The report also shows that large corporations are gobbling up farmland in the province.
But I don't think we can dictate or put parameters around what the size of a farm looks like. Because like I said, I have neighbors that are family farms that farm 20 to 30,000 acres. They're still a family farm, they're still a neighbor. They've had the opportunity and the ability to expand, and good for them, right?
The price of farmland isn't the only thing holding Crest back from expanding his operations. There's also a limited supply, the lowest it's been in years according to the RE/MAX report. There's none available near Crest's farm outside Odessa, but he's still optimistic his small farm can continue to thrive and prosper.
We're able to produce more for the world on less land, and I think that's one of the things you can do to help out for the next generation.
Cress's kids are already helping out on the farm. He hopes farmland prices don't get too out of hand and deter them from continuing the family tradition of farming. Will McLernan, CBC News.
Well, after a disappointing season so far, the Edmonton Elks have fired general manager and head coach Chris Jones.
You know, it's unfortunate, but when you're the head coach, the blame is put on you when things don't go well, and when things do, you try to give all of that to everybody else. You try to disperse it out, but it's definitely, a tough day. I think we're all in shock right now, but at the end of the day, we got to lace our boots up and keep pushing forward.
Yeah, I know Chris has worked tremendously hard to bring this franchise around, but and when you're own 5, there's got to be some consequences.
The club announced they were relieving Jones of his duties earlier this afternoon. It follows an 0-5 start to the 2024 season. Jones was hired by the Elks in December of 2021. He had previously led the team, then known as the Eskimos, to a Grey Cup championship in 2015 before joining the Riders as head coach and GM. Two faces familiar to Rider fans will take over for Jones in Edmonton. Quarterbacks coach Jarius Jackson will become interim head coach, while G. Roy Simon becomes interim general manager.
Adams takes off. 10, 5, touchdown!
Well, BC Lions quarterback Vernon Adams Jr. sealing the deal on his team's 35-20 victory over the Saskatchewan Roughriders Saturday. It marked the first loss this season for the Green and White as they fall to 4-1. It wasn't all bad news for the Riders, though. QB Shea Patterson made good on 17 of 25 passes for over 250 yards. The Lions are now atop the West Division leaderboard at 5-1. The Riders are back in action Friday at home against the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. We will be back after the break. Welcome back. What started out as questions about a relative turned into a trip that one man from Fort Capel will never forget. Corey Generow is Indigenous, but always knew he had European ancestry. And as Louise Big Eagle reports, a trip overseas allowed him to connect with a side of his family he never knew.
Corey Generow was 10 years old when he first wanted to know who his grandfather, Bill Wilson, was. He knew he was an Indigenous, but he didn't know where he came from. It turned out his grandfather was Scottish. Generow decided to plan a trip with his mom Wanda to visit Scotland and the places his ancestors may have lived. He learned they face discrimination in a very similar way Indigenous people in Canada have.
We know, we can prove it, it's shown in the papers. We heard stories. Our ancestors were here. Our ancestors were forced out of the Isles into the Highlands, and then forced from the outer Highlands to the inner Highlands, and then forced into Inverness, and forced to come to Canada. And we can backtrace all of this.
Generow found out his great-great-grandfather, William Wilson, died at Passchendaele. He was a soldier with a unit of the Scottish military during the First World War. So they made a stop in Belgium to honor him. On a visit to Dunvegan Castle, they came across a Clan MacLeod registry book. Only those in the clan can sign it. Corey pulled out his papers that prove his ancestry on those lands.
It was a very special moment for us, right? That, we're not only here visiting, exploring our ancestry, but now we're accepted.
A guide told him his great-great-grandfather would have been standing right where they were in the castle, as they would have walked up the steps and into a hall to swear his oath to the military.
Even like right now, I'm getting kind of emotional thinking about it, because like I know my Cree ancestors and my Soto ancestors and my Dakota ancestors, but this was the moment when I really got to know my Scottish ancestors. You know, when I pray and ask for my ancestors to come and help, you know, and geez, sorry about that. And that's when it became real for me, you know.
Genero says after his return, some of his friends and relatives shared with him that they have Scottish blood too. He says there can be a stigma among Indigenous people about embracing their non-Indigenous roots. He wants Indigenous people to know it's okay to accept all of who you are. Louise Begeagle, CBC News, Regina.
The weather update is brought to you by Capital Ford Lincoln, proud partner of the Saskatchewan Roughriders.
And weather specialist Tyreek Reed joining us now for a look at the forecast. That blast of heat last week, Ty, reminding us that summer, of course, is here. But I got to say, I did enjoy the a little more comfortable weather today.
Oh, of course. You and I both, Ethan. You know, of course, last week, as you mentioned, we were dealing with that extreme heat. We were waking up to temperatures in the mid to upper 20s in a lot of areas last week. Today, on my way to work, it was only in the upper teens, and we're still feeling that cooler air right now throughout most of the province. Right now, in the north, we're seeing temperatures in the low 20s, even in the mid-teens in areas like Collins Bay. As we head down into south and central Saskatchewan, we're still feeling that cooler air right now too. Sitting below seasonal in a lot of areas. Usually we should be around 25 degrees for this time of the year. But of course, after that heat wave last week, I think that we're definitely enjoying these temperatures here in much of the province. Now, as we take a look at our jet stream here, we're still going to be feeling these temperatures tomorrow, but then come Wednesday, we're going to see this ridge start to form over most of the prairies, and that's really going to start to bring the heat once again. So I know we're all enjoying these cooler temperatures, but it does seem like it's not going to last as long as we want it to. We could see some extreme heat warnings because of that. As of right now, we are still tracking some precipitation, mainly to the west, and that does seem to be traveling southeast. And of course, this does seem to be bringing some thunderstorms along with it, mainly in central areas. But as that heads east tonight, we could see most of that thunderstorm activity to the southeast. And we're going to start to see that move in through the overnight. Heading into tomorrow, we're going to start to see a lot of clearing. We were met with a lot of cloud cover today in south and central Saskatchewan. That's going to start to clear up, and we'll only see precipitation to the north as we head into Wednesday as well. Heading into Thursday, that's when we'll start to see more of that activity come back into southern areas of the province. Now, we're still dealing with some air quality statements and advisories to the north because of that wildfire. Those many wildfires actually that are burning in northern Saskatchewan, and that smoke does seem like it's going to be sticking around with us as we head further into the week. Now, let's take a look at our 7-day forecast here. Seeing temperatures around seasonal tomorrow, but as we mentioned earlier, as we head further into the week, that's when we're going to climb back into the 30s. With the humidex, it's going to feel closer to 40 on some days, and that's going to continue into next week as well. So we're feeling the relief right now, but that's going to end very, very soon. As we take a look over at Saskatoon, also seeing seasonal conditions tomorrow, and on Wednesday, we're going to creep back into the 30s because of that humidex. Once again, it's going to be very, very hot. We could possibly see some extreme heat warnings because of this issue throughout most of the province, not just here in Saskatoon and Regina. So we're going to keep our eye on that. We're going to get our water bottles ready, Ethan, because we're definitely going to want to stay hydrated for this.
Yeah, I know my AC enjoyed the nice break, but looks like I'll be firing that back up.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, thanks, Ty.
No problem.
Stay with us. We have more news after the break. Donald Trump is now the Republican presidential nominee. He has been the presumptive nominee for months, but it was the vote today at the Republican National Convention that made it official. Chris Reyes has more from Milwaukee.
An eventful first day here at the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. The striking of the gavel officially opening the week-long gathering. House Speaker Mike Johnson getting things started with a rundown of convention rules.
Without objection, the reading of the roll call of states for presenting the names for candidates for nomination is dispensed with, and non-delegates shall be permitted to make nominating and seconding speeches.
Following that, state by state, the roll call, with delegates officially pledging their votes to nominate Donald Trump for president. Close to 2,500 delegates are on the floor from around the country. Trump very quickly got past the finish line to secure the nomination, to great cheers.
Let's make it official. Accordingly, the chair announces that President Donald J. Trump, having received a majority of the votes entitled to be cast at the convention, has been selected as the Republican Party nominee for President of the United States.
After that nomination, another major development. Donald Trump posting on social media his VP pick, Ohio Senator J.D. Vance. Trump wrote, J.D. honorably served our country in the Marine Corps, graduated from Ohio State University in 2 years, summa cum laude, and is a Yale Law School graduate. He went on to say J.D. has had a very successful business career in technology and finance. Soon after, Vance arrived at the convention and greeted Republican delegates. From President Biden, a quick reaction.
He's a clone of Trump on the issues. A clone of Trump on the issues. So I don't see any difference.
Vance rose to prominence after he published a best-selling memoir turned movie, Hillbilly Elegy, all about his upbringing in a working-class family in Ohio. The crowd at the convention in Milwaukee chanted the senator's name soon as the announcement came out. Trump arrived in Milwaukee Sunday night. He is slated to formally accept the nomination of his party for president from that podium on Thursday. Chris Reyes, CBC News, Milwaukee.
And Tyreek is back with one last look at our forecast.
Thank you, Ethan. Well, tonight we're going to be met with that cooler air once again here in Regina. As we wake up tomorrow morning, that clearing will start to come back in finally. So we'll be met with a lot of sunny skies heading into tomorrow afternoon. That's when we'll get back up there in those daytime highs, getting close to around 25 degrees tomorrow. Over in Saskatoon, also feeling that cooler air tonight with a lot of clear skies. As we wake up tomorrow morning, we're going to be met with temperatures in the upper teens once again throughout most of South and Central Saskatchewan. But then as we head into the afternoon, that's when we'll get back into the 20s. We're going to be looking at daytime highs at around 25 degrees in Saskatoon and much of South and Central Saskatchewan. Ethan?
Okay, one more day for some more comfortable-ish weather.
Exactly.
Okay, thanks, Ty.
No problem.
And before we leave you, hundreds of people carried the Olympic torch through Paris yesterday and today, and crowds lined the streets to watch. About 10,000 people were chosen to carry the iconic flame across France. The torch's journey will end July 26th, when it'll be used to light the Olympic cauldron on the River Seine to mark the start of the Games. And you'll be able to watch full coverage of the Paris Olympics right here on CBC. And that is it for us tonight. For news anytime, you can always head to our website, cbc.ca/Sask, subscribe to the CBC Saskatchewan YouTube channel, or download the CBC News app. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great night.